What's the most legendary thing that happened in your school? Story 1. I took an A-plus course in high school. We had an alright size lab room for stripping computers and another room full of computers for other work or lessons. There were a few stuffed animals in the lesson room as an attempt by my teacher to decorate. Those come into play later. My teacher kept finding adult film history on one of the computers, and it was always horribly spelled or incoherent searches, and she assumed it was a freshman being a smarty to impress his friends during a different class. One day she gets fed up with it and makes a special project for us nerds in her A-plus course. She gave us one of the lab computers and the smallest cam she could find and asked us to make a hidden camera. We complied and made a decent one and brought it in the other room, set it to record with more than enough hard drive space, and then aimed it at the perp's computer. The next day, we fire up the video and see one of the seniors coming in before school starts, Googling some good old adult film, and giving himself the old wax job. He cleaned up with one of these stuffed animals and went about his business. So she threw out the stuffed animals and the cops got involved, and the kid got into trouble but went into the army after high school. So maybe it all worked out in the end. Story 2. I attended a high school called Rampart that, despite being a blue ribbon school, had serious budget issues. The budget problems got so bad that the principal started renting out the school gym to anyone willing to pay up to use it. Some guy rented the gym out for a Saturday night, saying that he was going to hold a church dance. Instead, he held a rave that got so out of hand it destroyed the gym. The incident quickly grew into legend amongst the students. Many have claimed to have been there or to have known the guy who threw the rave. Now, we weren't able to use the gym for the rest of the year. They kept the doors locked, but there were some constant attempts to force them open so that we could see the damage. It didn't take long for the students to start referring to the school as Rave Part, and whenever we had to sing the national anthem, we'd finish with, "and the home of the rave." The next year, we had a new principal too, but we never knew if the old principal was fired because of the rave incident. I'm sure some questions were raised by the school board to the principal after that incident. While I applaud the person trying to raise money for their school, this seems like an oversight to not double check on the event, or at least maybe have your own staff around to monitor. Were these people just allowed to hang out in the school unsupervised? That seems like a dumb idea, even if it were actually a church event, like they had been told. Those church parties can get out of control sometimes. Story 3. This happened at my school in the UK around 2002. We had an indoor swimming pool at my school that was always really cold. And one particularly freezing December day, a bunch of us decided that we really didn't fancy having to do swimming for PE. So we dared this kid called Todd, who was pretty crazy, to crap in the pool. He said he would do it for $10. He had a quick whip around and managed to get the money pretty quick between us, and to avoid getting caught, he decided to crap in the pool from the roof through a skylight. A lot of the buildings in our school had staircases on the outside, so it didn't take much effort for a couple of us to get him the leg up onto the roof. Once he was up there, he ran back down to the pool and looked through the windows. And sure enough, after a couple of minutes, we saw 2 or 3 of Todd's apples drop into the perfectly still pool, causing a gentle, yet disgusting, but oddly beautiful ripple. There was no PE for us that day. Story 4. When I was in grade 9, I was sitting in the computer lab working in the communications class. All of a sudden, we hear this loud revving getting louder and louder, something passing by very quickly and then fading away. Our teacher ran out of the room after it, and crikey, I had no idea the man could move that quickly. I was in crutches due to a sports injury, so I had to hobble out behind the rest of the class as we tried to find out what was going on. And apparently, one of the seniors brought an ATV to school and drove it through the halls. What was legendary was that he somehow was never caught. Story 5. A guy from my high school thought it would be a good idea to streak through the halls on the last day of school. After running around butt naked, people who witnessed it began whispering about some guy streaking. Pretty soon, the entire school was talking about this unknown mystery guy who ran around with his willy out. A biology teacher witnessed it and said, "Maybe it's just chilly today, but he isn't very well endowed." Now, soon after, he went to the front office and turned himself in, because he apparently walked into a room full of administrators, all women, and just said, "It was me." They all busted out laughing and said, "Yeah, just don't do it again, okay?" Story 6. Our school has a huge statue of a Mustang at the front because our mascot is a Mustang. It's about 40 feet above the entryway, so everyone sees it when they come in. Now, one morning, there was a bright pink toy, if you know what I mean, on it because Mustangs are male and our huge statue was neutered. It took them quite a while to get it off there because they didn't want to ruin the statue or leave any piece of the evidence behind. and it was too heavy to remove from its place. So there it stayed with a banner hung across the entryway blocking the statue. Now nobody knows who did it except for the masterminds of the crime. It's like the perfect crime. Everybody gets to see your work, but only the criminals know the real story of how it came to be. It's like pulling off an epic amount of TPing in some yards and houses. Depending on how tall the statue is as well, it might also be the reason they couldn't just immediately remove the addition to the horse's groin. I feel like you're just asking for trouble anytime you have a large statue that gives students easy access to its anatomy. Story 7. My first day of high school. I was starting at a whole new neighborhood from moving and knew no one, so I kept to myself. I didn't handle crowds all too well, but I mustered the courage to get out of bed and get ready for school. I ran downstairs and talked to my dad about what I expected to get out of the day and ate breakfast. I walked out to the corner to catch the school bus, and that was awful. Nowhere to sit, as everyone felt they had their own damn seat. Long story short, I made it to school. Now, as soon as we made it to the school, I started walking to my locker. There were so many people I was about to lose my mind, and I asked myself if it could get any worse. It did. A girl bumped me from behind to get ahead to catch up with someone, and in one swift action, she ripped off her backpack and unzipped it to pull out a kitchen knife and stab the girl directly in front of me, right in the back. I froze. I couldn't breathe. I felt dizzy. I turned around and walked straight home. I lived about 10 miles away and I just kept walking. I never looked back. I just wanted to make it home, crawl upstairs, and sleep in. Story 8. Apparently, some of the guys a few years ahead of me got into the principal's car, took it off the brake, and pushed it up a makeshift ramp to the roof of the shed. I don't know how he got it down. The guys in my year managed to swipe the vice principal's smoking pipe, and they put up ransom posters everywhere. In another class, they managed to get into the ceiling tiles and plug socket, so they took an old phone with a dirty ringtone and a charger and left it in there. For whatever reason, because of acoustics, the sound seemed to shift around the room as you walked. The number got passed around so people could call whenever they needed to disrupt the class for a while. Story 9. 2 years ago, the app Yik Yak was growing in popularity at my school. Maybe about 25% of the student population had it, but since it is anonymous, people started roasting other people through it. Just as people were no longer using Yik Yak, our principal heard about people roasting other people, and he made an announcement talking about Yik Yak and digital citizenship. Naturally, everyone re-downloaded the app, and anybody who didn't previously have downloaded it as well. Now, word quickly got out that some teachers got Yik Yak as well, and were monitoring it. People started to post stuff like, "fight in the art hallway," and laugh as a group of 3 teachers would speed walk by then towards the art hallway, on to find that there was no fight, and see the next post, "fight in the cafeteria." This went on for like 45 minutes until people moved on to better pranks. "I'm pulling the fire alarm next period," and our principal misread this as firearm and called a lockdown on the school, which lasted for 80 minutes. And there were cops that cased out all around the whole school. Now, later that night, my school was on the news, and Yik Yak is now blocked within 100 meters of any school in my school board. Story 10. I went to a professional training high school. We had to choose a major for our senior year, and on Tuesday and Thursdays, we would spend the entire day in classes involving our chosen major. Strange, yeah, but it only lasted for a few years. Now, it's just a regular magnet school. Whatever. Here's my story. My tech teacher was pretty cool. He'd give us a project on Tuesday morning, and we'd have until Thursday afternoon to turn it in. If we were done early, have fun on the internet. If late, well, that's a strike on your grade. Most of these students busted their behinds on projects on Tuesday so that we could watch Jerry Springer on TV cart in the back of the room on Thursdays. Me and 2 other kids would play Warcraft 2 on the network computers that were set up. Seriously, this teacher didn't give a crap as long as our work was done. Now, one Thursday, one of the students in my class was flipping around the in-service channels the school had. Sometimes they would play a movie on it for some classes. And guess what? Adult film. Hardcore film. Student quickly turned it down and turned the TV from the line of view of the teacher. But the teacher still heard it. So he came over, coffee cup in hand, looked at the class, looked at the TV that wasn't turned off in time, looked back at the class, and took a sip of his coffee. He said, "Now, first off, is anyone offended? The class? No. All right, keep it low. And if someone comes in, turn it off." And the legendary teacher award goes to, now here's a teacher who is definitely comfortable in their own skin and apparently doesn't really care what happens to them if someone were to complain about the raunchy film being shown in their class. One could argue that they were just trying to pass on a valuable lesson. If you get your work done on time, you have earned the right to play Warcraft and watch adult films in their free time. Also, in the comments, would you rather have been watching Jerry Springer, playing Warcraft, or watching the adult film? Story 11. We used to have school sports on a Tuesday or Wednesday afternoon, and all of them required people to change into their sport uniform, all except one, 10-pin bowling. Now, because of this, 10-pin bowling was very popular among people who couldn't be bothered getting changed. Now, one day when I was in year 8, a guy in my year bet another kid $10 that he wouldn't take a crap on the bathroom floor of the bowling alley. So naturally, the kid, who is pretty stupid, agrees with the bet and promptly craps on the bathroom floor. Pretty soon after that, it becomes obvious who took a crap on the floor, and both the guy who offered the money and the guy who took the crap both got into a lot of trouble. The saddest part about this story is that he never even got the $10. Story 12. I was in an all-boys high school, and this was just one of the many pranks and stuff we did. This happened a few years before I was in the school, but one guy decided to get back at one of the old cranky teachers we had whose class was on the second floor. He decided to purposely not do his homework to get in trouble so as to set the plan in motion. She was also constantly picking on him, and that day he started crying, fake obviously, and saying that he can't take it anymore. He then proceeded to jump out of the window onto a high jump mattress that was placed underneath the window by his friends. Before the teacher could look out of the window, they removed it and he went to lie down on the ground in a manner which resembled a mangled body. The teacher freaked out, went to fetch the principal and nurse, and before they got there, he got up, went back to class, and sat down at his seat as if nothing happened. Teacher was speechless. Story 13. In high school, we weren't allowed to wear costumes for Halloween. My senior year, a giant group of us, about a good half or 3/4 of the class, decided that we were going to dress up anyway and meet in the parking lot before lunch to march in together. I spent the night before making my costume, which was a suit of armor made of cardboard with metallic tape, a sword made the same way, and one of those broomstick horses. The next day, we all gathered like we had said and marched in together. It was hilarious, but I guess they found out, so the deans and assistant deans were waiting for us in the cafeteria to take our IDs so that we could report to detention. One of my friends had dressed up like an ATM that he had made out of cardboard, and when they asked him for his ID, he was ready and slipped it out a slot like a debit card. The best part was at the end of the day, when we all were gathered for detention, they didn't have enough room for us, and all the other people that were there for other reasons. Out of frustration, they decided to make our detention Saturdays and spread them out. It was totally worth it, though. Story 14. At our school in the UK, on the Year 11's final day of the year, they would do Egg and Flour Day. Now, essentially, pelting the younger years with eggs and flour. This was a long-standing tradition at my school, and it went back decades. As you can imagine, with parents understandably annoyed at the sight of the kids coming home covered in the mess, the school received a lot of complaints. Now, because of this, the school really clamped down on it in the past 2 or 3 years, with huge punishments for those caught taking part. To get around this, the Year 11s typically moved the location to somewhere off grounds where students could be ambushed on their way home, typically the local shops. Anyway, it was our turn. We are the Year 11s now. We wanted to make our mark, and a group of around 10 of us or so got together towards the end of the year and started brainstorming. It took us about a week to come up with it, and it was perfect. Or so we thought. Now here was the plan. The school was recently going through some renovations, so a few things were moved around and a few areas were off limits, including one of the fields. Now this field was where we would go in the event of a fire drill. Because of this, the fire drill point was moved to the tennis courts. Great. Why was this great? Because the tennis courts bordered on the local woods. The very edge of the woods were bordered by incredibly dense growth that was very difficult to see anything through, and between the growth and the tennis courts was a 10-foot fence, and just beyond the growth was a pathway. Perfect. So, the plan was set. We will send a guy inside, get him to pull the fire alarm, and then send a barrage of eggy flour death to the unsuspecting, lower-year peasants beyond the fence. Skip forward to the day of the event. We sent Tim in to be the man on the inside. We were ready and waiting in the woods, armed to the teeth with pancake ingredients. We waited a long time. It must have been like an hour and a half at that point, and we'll come back to this later. This was before mobile phones, so we had no contact with the man inside. A slight oversight. We sent in Christian to find out what was going on, and then we waited some more. Not long this time, 20 minutes later, the bell went off, and it was happening. First, we could only hear the piercing ring of the bell, and a minute later, there was a loud chatter of many prepubescent voices. It got louder and louder. The tennis court was filling up, students were getting into their lines, and we waited for the perfect moment to strike. A few more minutes later, and things quieted down, and we started to hear the teachers shouting out names, going through their registries. This was it. Time to strike. With the students now silent, it was time to unsilent them. Without saying a word, we unleashed. Cartons of eggs were emptied into the air, over the fence and down onto the underlings, the most satisfying kersplats. Flour bags were split and tossed over, leaving trails of white smoke before landing with a puff and filling up the area with clouds of potential biscuit. The screams, oh, they were glorious. The complete sound of chaos, it started with silence, shocked as to what was going on, and then the fear set in. Nobody wanted to get egged. The tennis courts exploded into a mass of running kids, dodging yoke, trying to get out of the way, teachers trying to find what was going on, barking orders, and then trying to calm everyone down to little success. And that was it. Within 60 seconds, we had exhausted our ammo and it was time to retreat. Laughing hysterically and celebrating our accomplishment, we melted back into the woods and fell back to our meeting point. It was done, and we were legends. Now, let's fast forward a week. Remember Tim, the guy on the inside who took too long pulling the alarm? So it turns out he didn't pull the alarm because he noticed that they were all covered by CCTV. Another oversight. When Christian went in, he didn't bother looking and pulled the first alarm he came across. He was called into the school a few days later and ordered to give a list of names. It was either he did or prom would be canceled that year. Now, I can't blame him, really. I probably would have done the same thing. Those who were on the list, the choice was either 8 hours community service in the school or be barred from prom. We all took the service and spent the day with the school caretaker, doing absolutely nothing. It was great. 10 out of 10, would egg again. I have to appreciate the level of planning and cooperation it took between these students to pull this off. It was like some Ocean's 11 casino heist type crap. These kids were definitely going places after this incident. I sort of also got the sense that the school sort of had to deal out some sort of punishment because of the complaints by teachers and parents, but the 8 hours of community service felt like the bare minimum. Almost like the principal at the school was also very impressed with the execution of the prank, and they couldn't bring themselves to actually be pissed off. Story 15. We had a poop thrower. Now, I don't mean a little poop. I mean borderline natural disaster. That wasn't the legendary part, though. The response from the school was, new bathroom policy. All bathrooms except for one for each gender were to be locked during classes. The unlocked bathrooms would each have a bathroom monitor outside of them. If you needed to use the bathroom, you had to have a pass signed by your teacher, go to the bathroom, have the bathroom inspector take your ID, and log your visit. Then you can take care of your business, have the bathroom monitor inspect the bathroom for ballistic feces, and then have them sign you out and return your ID. And then you get them to sign a pass for you to return to class and go back to your learning. Now, to clarify, this was not a temporary measure. I later learned from some folks who attended the school after I did that the policy was still in place as recently as 2013. Story 16. Some background. 4 years ago, went to a small Christian high school. Open campus access from the outside, not one big building entered through the inside. This school was terrible. To attend, we had to sign a document that let them breach our rights to privacy and that they could go through our phones, texts, backpacks without any probable cause. Drug testing students randomly, paid for by our tuition. Drug dogs on campus, that never caught anything in my 4 years, also paid by tuition. Every class loved to hate the school, and it was like the establishment. Anyway, had this group of 4 kids in my high school, a couple years older than me, come to school one night and wipe crap everywhere on the windows of our classrooms and inside of the door handles. Teachers got real pissed at that clever move. One teacher was so infuriated that he said to our class, "Screw the senior class," absolutely enraged. Now anyway, they canceled prom and our student pride week unless one of them came forward. For at least 2 weeks, no one came forward and no one knew if it was even a senior prank or just kids from elsewhere. Every day at the end of school, our principal would come on and reiterate his blank threats, and we all just laughed. I was a sophomore, so I didn't care about prom. After a couple weeks, the principal canceled graduation, and parents were outraged, and the school quickly stood firm and that there'd be no graduation, and everyone would just be mailed their diplomas. Now, eventually, one of the groups came forward and snitched. One kid lost a scholarship for D1 sports, another, who was the class president, and the other 2 were expelled. Best part about it was that they were deemed the Poopatrators, which remains the most infamous nickname in our school's history. This story is 100% true, and shout out to the Poopatrators that were as fed up as all of us. Consider, if you will, comparing this story to the previous operation where the students egged and floured their classmates during a fire drill. The contrasting levels of planning and creativity is very interesting. On the one hand, you have multiple players, contingencies, and actual thought put into it, and here you literally just have students rubbing their feces on things. Wow, guys. Brilliant, I tell ya. And all of that for some serious loss of opportunity, like the D1 scholarship. And above all, the loss of dignity due to the fact that you were handling human poop is the worst outcome of all.